Intro chat with Merrill's live, digging deep where techs thrive. From the latest hacks to cool updates, join the ride, don't be late.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Entra Chat. Today I'm really excited to have Jordan Gross on the podcast. Jordan has worked on some of my favorite features, and I'm sure a lot of you listening will also love the features that she's worked on. And one really big one is what we're going to talk on today, which is a really important part of bridging the hybrid and the cloud world. I'll let Jordan introduce herself and share like some of the features she's worked on at Microsoft.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm super excited to be here and chatting today. My name is Jordan and I'm a PM at Microsoft. And I have been here roughly 5 years, and I started off in the devices world. So everything ranging for getting access to resources in a protected manner to having a productive end user experience, everything in that world was up my alley. And then more recently, I switched over to a sister team where I now focus on hybrid authentication. And more specifically, I own Entra Kerberos, which is my big thing that I'm excited to talk to you all about today. Um, that, like you mentioned, Meryl, this is a really good connection to help customers migrate over from on-prem to cloud or something in between. And then if time allows, I'd also love to chat about one of my favorite features that I did on the devices team, which is called MAM on Edge. And it basically, like it says, you can have MAM on an Edge browser, which is very different than what we had done in the past. So lots of fun topics today.
It is, yes, certainly. And for me, coming from someone who used to work at a customer site, my first love was Intune before Entra.
Yeah.
And people would be mistaken. So I did a huge rollout of Intune like way back. And like one of my first questions, and I asked the Intune PM who was helping us was like, we have MAM on the browser on the mobiles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when do we get the same experience on Windows? Because you don't want to manage the entire Windows device.
Right.
So it was something I really look forward to. And I didn't know you were 5 years at Microsoft, which makes me also the same. So I joined in March of 2020, just when COVID hit. So
Yeah, exactly.
those were fun times.
Fun times in quotations. Yes, yes, exactly. Well, congrats also on the 5-year mark.
Yeah,
That's great.
congratulations. Yeah, I've got my crystal as well.
Oh,
I got
nice.
a little early for some reason. So cool. All right. So let's start off with Entra Kerberos.
Yes.
What is it? Like, what does it do? Why do we need it? If you can just give us an overview and then like deep dive into how it actually works, under
Okay.
the covers.
Awesome. So Entra Kerberos is an extension of the Kerberos, like plain Kerberos authentication method. And so Kerberos is an authentication, user-less, UX-less authentication that allows end users to get access to protected resources. And what we've done with Entra Kerberos is we've now created this hybrid world where either the user or the resource can be on-prem or in the cloud. And so we've allowed for that authentication to extend into the cloud. And that really helps because, yeah, please.
Sorry, just to take a step back. So Kerberos, there might be people who might have heard this word for the first time, especially if
okay.
you are like coming into Entra completely new, if you're just starting out. I'm sure the old timers know and have bled
Sure.
Kerberos. So for those who are coming in new, Kerberos is sort of an on-prem AD technology, right? It's from 90s when
Yeah, I think maybe 1980s, actually,
80s.
even that far back. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so that was basically the protocol we all used when you connect to a Windows domain controller, Windows server from a Windows PC, they used the Kerberos protocol to talk to each other and then authenticate as the sort of the way you would talk, right? And
Right.
why didn't we? So that was like the way that all the client server stuff happened, right? All of the authentication. You had local networks, everything was wired, and you had people going to work. Unlike the COVID times, you had to physically be
Yeah.
at work to use your PCs. We didn't have laptops then. So it was really built for a different era, right? The whole Kerberos
Exactly.
protocol. And I see,
Yeah.
I think one thing they say is it's very chatty. There's a lot of traffic going over the network, the way it talks and so on,
Yeah.
uh,
And just
when it
to build
works.
off of that, one of the ways, like it's super chatty because it has three parts, like three parties. And one way that when I was learning Kerberos that helps me remember this was that Kerberos, like the title Kerberos, was actually named after the three-headed dog guarding Hades called
Right.
Kerberos.
Yes.
And it was which is just awesome. But so there's the three heads that represent three different things, and it's one of them is like the user or the client. One of them is the application they're trying to get access to, and one of them is this like trusted third party, which we call KDC or Key Distribution Center. So because of all that, there's a lot of chit chat back and forth to make it all work together.
Yep. Sorry, I interrupted you. So, like, it came from that whole on-prem world, right? And we were
Yeah.
using that. But so, why didn't Entra use it when Microsoft started building Microsoft Entra? Why didn't they build it all on Kerberos?
Because okay, that's a great question. So um, we have multiple types of authentication that Entra supports. Um, Entra Kerberos is one of them, but for example, OAuth is another one. And customers that have the ability to use more modern authentication, such as OAuth, we do suggest doing that. However, there's certain circumstances where customers can't, or they're still in this transition period, or one reason or another where they still need to use an older, more legacy authentication, such as Kerberos, and because of that, we uh, supported their scenarios by creating Entra Kerberos.
Right. Yes. And yeah, I think a lot of people feel they'll still have on-prem AD for a long time to come.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you still need to connect to that. It was interesting. I was at a conference last year, the tech conference, and they were asking questions from people, and they had these yes/no signs
Hmm.
everyone could hold up.
Yeah.
And when they asked how many people do like hybrid, Entra and on-prem AD, like almost everyone obviously said yes. So very few people who are not doing Entra. It was all they were all doing Entra and on-prem AD. But then the next question was, do you see yourself getting rid of on-prem AD in the next 10 years? And almost like 90% or 95% said no. Like
Yeah.
it was like a sea of reds saying like no, they didn't see themselves moving completely off on-prem AD. So it is going to be there for quite a while, right? And you have apps and servers, but I know many customers who even I've helped who have completely gone to the cloud. And I definitely want to bring some of those folks on the chat to, share their journey, like how they moved completely to the cloud. But in this hybrid world, we still need to have, cloud PCs that can work with on-prem AD apps that are running in on-prem AD, right?
Yes.
And so on. Okay,
Yes,
so
exactly.
yeah, so where does Entra Kerberos come into this picture, and like where does it fit in? What problems is it solving?
Kerberos supports multiple different scenarios. So I think the biggest one that like jumps out at me would be this transition period for customers. Customers who have previously been very heavy on-prem and now want to take dramatic steps to go towards the cloud. There's multiple ways to accomplish this, but Entra Kerberos is a really good like first step because it allows you to essentially do the same things you're doing right now, but just also with a cloud element. So AD is more minimized and the cloud is like eventually you can be cloud forward. So helping with that hybrid scenario is the biggest thing that I think of. But then there's a couple other like interesting scenarios that talking with customers or even with my fellow like colleagues here that I learned about. So one of them is there's certain companies that like will never, even with 10 plus years, they'll never completely go off on-prem AD because of regulations, for example. So a common one that I say is like a bank. And so they need to have some sort of like security with this like really valuable information that they store for their customers. So they will have some sort of on-premises forever. And so we need to support that scenario. And then the second uh, interesting scenario that I learned about from my colleagues was that any sort of file sharing system, especially with Azure Files that uses the SMB protocol, relies on Kerberos as the authentication protocol. And that was all good and dandy when things were just on-prem, but now with in the cloud, we still need to figure out a way to support file shares that use this SMB protocol with Kerberos, and so that's where Entra Kerb comes in. So that could be the type of thing, like it could be completely in the cloud. Like in the future, it could be completely in the cloud with both users and resources that you're accessing, and that will still leverage Entra Kerberos.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting use cases.
Yeah, so there's some great value with Entra Kerberos for years to come. Even as customers slowly transition to the cloud, there's still some wonderful value here.
Nice. Right. So how does Entra Kerberos work?
Entra Kerberos is very diverse in what it can do. We have two types of styles, maybe is a way to describe it, styles of Entra Kerberos. And so the first one is modern authentication, up-level trust. And the second one is incoming trust or down level. So incoming trust and down level would be things like older Windows machines, like Windows 8, or Windows, like newer Windows machines, like Windows 10 or 11, that's not managed with Entra. Instead, it's managed with on-premises AD.
On-prem AD.
Right. So even in those scenarios, we actually do still support Entra Kerberos, but it just looks a little different. That's the type of thing where in that scenario, an end user will get what's called a referral ticket, and they will get that from their on-premises AD, and then that has a relationship with our cloud realm, Entra Cloud. And so that that connection allows for that scenario to occur. The other interesting thing about this scenario is that it's not enabled by default. A customer, like the tenant admin, needs to configure this, needs to say, I want my end user to get this ticket during this for this application or something like that. They need to explicitly create this config. And so that's one of them. But the more common scenario is this modern auth up-level trust scenario. And that's where it could be an Entra, it could be a hybrid Entra joined, it could be a Entra registered device. As long as it's managed by Entra and it's Windows 10 or higher, then this scenario can work. And what's going on here is that it's really convenient. It's really convenient because essentially what happens is whenever an end user logs into Windows with Windows Hello for Business, then they're automatically granted what's called a cloud TGT and a partial TGT. And these TGTs are called ticket granting tickets. And so like the end user flow would be, I open my laptop, I sign in, I get these tickets. That doesn't mean
You
you get
get them
access to
from
resources.
Entra, right? Those
Yeah,
tickets are from Entra. Yep.
yes. Very similar to a PRT, if anyone is familiar with the devices world. Kind of similar when you like first log in, you get a devices like PRT, primary refresh token. Very similarly, you get this cloud TGT, partial TGT from Entra. And that is also very convenient because that happens by default. The tenant admin does not need to configure anything for that to
Right.
happen. It
Nice.
just happens, um, which allows for a very productive flow for end users so that they don't have to do something clunky to get this TGT. It's just automatically there. So that's lovely. And then, um, so you have this TGT, but like, how do you actually get access to the resource that you want to get access to? So what happens there is that the user goes to whatever app they want to look at, and the app will request for this TGT. We will send them the
Because the app
TGT.
is an on-prem app, right? Like it doesn't know anything about Entra. Is that right?
It could it could be an on-prem app, yes, and we it could also be in the cloud.
Okay.
So it's any sort of mix as long as the user is hybrid. It's any sort of mix with it's an on cloud or in on premises resource.
So it could, like when you say cloud, like Azure Files, which still supports like like the protocol, right?
Right.
Kerberos and right. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So Azure Fires will be a wonderful example of cloud resource, and like App Proxy, for example, would be a good example of an on-premises resource. Anything through App Proxy. And so as the user is trying to access like something, essentially in the process, we need to give them what's called a TGS, which is a ticket granting service. Um, and you exchange your TGT to get a TGS. And then this TGS can be given to the application, and then the application will give them access.
Right. And so the domain control is not in this whole conversation. The domain control is not involved in that flow at all, right? So how does the app know that it should trust this ticket that's coming from Entra? Like the app would most probably be, connected to on-prem AD, right? So
Mhm.
it's mostly primarily trusting on-prem AD.
Yep. Yes. So we have Entra has a relationship with on-prem AD. So we actually create what's called this trust relationship between on-premises AD into what's called um, Kerberos.microsoftonline.com, which is our Kerberos realm. And so by creating this trust relationship, we have like this application that is on-prem can trust this ticket
Okay.
that's coming from Entra.
And do admins need to do anything to enable that? Or is it part of like Connect Sync? Or how does that get set up, that
Yes,
relationship?
there is right, yeah, there's an initial configuration that admins need to do to create this trust, but then once that trust is there, it's set.
And they would do it, I believe it's part of like, say, when you set up Hello for Business and other scenarios, you're basically running that command to set up that trust, right?
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
initially set them up, right?
exactly, exactly. You could do it via PowerShell and make it part of the same setup.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Nice. So that way the app doesn't know anything about the modern protocols like SAML Auth.
Right,
It still knows only Kerberos.
right.
Maybe it's an old app that was already built before, but now all these cloud joined, Entra joined devices can still connect and work with those legacy apps and those legacy technologies.
Right, exactly, which allows for pretty seamless transition, pretty seamless flow towards cloud forward, which is
Right.
our goal.
Nice. And it doesn't matter where the app lives, right? Whether it's on-prem and the app could someday move to the cloud, and maybe the app still
Right.
talks to like Entra. We have domain services in the cloud as well. So the app
Hmm.
could just move that way and it can still continue working for the user,
Yes,
right? Using those protocols.
exactly. So the way that we've been like kind of thinking about this is trying to do is like as easy as possible to allow our customers to migrate to the cloud. So if you know, the customer wants to move its authentication first, we could do Entra Kerberos. And then if they want to move the app to the cloud, then we can still, like, you don't have to change the authentication and you could, like, one step at a time. So it's not as overwhelming and daunting of a task to do everything at once.
Exactly. And some apps, like I know, have been written, some, written even in the 90s. I
Yeah.
wrote some of those apps.
Yeah.
I'm pretty old. But yeah, so, and no one maintains them anymore. Like the devs are no longer there. So no one can go in
Right.
and change those apps. So it's just running on that Windows server and it's up and running. No one wants to touch it because it does what it needs to do and it's a critical part of the
Yeah.
business. So you just want to allow people to access it, right?
Hmm.
As we modernize and move to the more Intune managed, cloud
Yeah.
managed devices that can work from anywhere.
Yeah, no doubt. It's daunting, it's scary to touch such a big application. And it's also very costly for some customers to try to migrate it or try to update its authentication. So anything that we could do to try to make that easier is what we're trying to do.
And if you go for things like Windows Hello for Business, then you're definitely relying on Kerberos, right, for
Mm-hmm.
those things to work. Because I know if you don't have Hello for Business, if you're still using username and password, then
Mm.
sometimes they fall back to NTLM
Right.
and you can still work. Those apps can still work. They're like, they don't use the tickets. They just send the username and password on-prem, as long as you have line of sight to the domain controller, they work, right? But if you are moving to phishing resistant auth as part of modernizing
Right.
Hello for Business and so on, this has to work. If it doesn't, then suddenly the user gets these dialog boxes, right, with
Yes,
the username and
exactly.
password, asking them to type it in.
Yeah. We definitely like have this NTLM as a fallback in certain scenarios, but another benefit for like pushing for Entra Kerberos over those, aside from just getting all these pop-ups, is that with Entra Kerberos you can actually apply conditional access policies, and that innately just makes things more secure. You have more fine, like, granularity over who gives access to what, when, and where, things like that. So by having your primary authentication be Entra Kerberos versus NTLM, it allows just generally for a better usability experience, a better transition experience, a more secure experience. So um, while we allow it as a fallback, we really push for Entra Kerberos. Yeah.
So what are the things that like don't work too well, or what are the things you're trying to address now with
Yeah.
Entra Kerberos?
Yes. So this is the fun, exciting part for me.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really interesting having taken this role, hearing all these different partner teams or customers reach out and say, I want this scenario, this scenario. I think the biggest thing right now that we're brainstorming and trying to tackle is how Entra Kerberos can support cloud-only users. Right now, we really only support hybrid users getting access to cloud and on-premises resources. But as part of the next step for a lot of customers is they want to make their hybrid users cloud only or at least like cloud managed. And currently today, we don't really support Entra Kerberos with those types of users. So that's a big blocker for customers. So having some sort of support there would be a really big win and something that we're trying to think about a lot and work with partner
Nice.
teams on.
Nice. So these are where you have an identity that only lives in the cloud. And I
Mhm.
know some customers are creating those, right? Like if the user doesn't need anything on-prem, you create them in the cloud. But then if they do need to access things on-prem, today it doesn't work, right, with
Right.
Entra Kerberos.
Unfortunately not. But so it's almost like when I say cloud only user, it's like almost like two types of users, which is kind of interesting. It's cloud only, like what you mentioned, where it's like purely in the cloud. like no reference at all onto AD. And then I think the term is cloud managed user, where there's a reference to this user on premises, but only like attributes can only be changed on in the cloud or can only be updated or removed in the cloud. And then it gets like the cloud Entra tells on premises the different changes. That user is also another type of user that we're aiming to support.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Very interesting.
And the
Nice.
reason why I mentioned that specific user is because while like new customers, it's easier for them to create cloud, like purely cloud only users. A lot of our existing customers have a lot of on-premises users. And so one of our other amazing teams within identity has created this like functionality called source of authority. And you can switch the source of authority from the on-premises to the cloud. And by doing that, it allows the end user, allows the customer to be more cloud forward. But unfortunately, then that disturbs the Entra Kerberos scenario and what we support. So that's something that we're working with that partner team on.
Cool. All right. So, what other scenarios do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so another big one is currently we only truly support Entra Kerberos with Windows devices. Um, That's our bread and butter. That's what we know. That's what we've been working on for a while. But we have gotten more and more customers reaching out to us wanting to support Entra Kerberos for both Mac and Linux devices. And that's a really interesting scenario because um, it is notoriously less common for businesses to have Mac and Linux, but we're slowly seeing an uptick in this and slowly seeing a desire for more support in these platforms. So we want to make sure that the entire
Ecosystem.
environment system that a customer has is supported. So we're looking into that as well, and seeing what we can do there. Um, and then there was one final scenario that was really interesting and related to Intune. And it was kind of similar to actually MAM with Edge. There is, yeah, there's some interest in supporting Entra Kerberos on mobile devices as well.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to say that. Like we talked about Mac Linux, I'm sure
yeah,
someone has the use case for mobile devices needing to access something on-prem. I'm
right,
guessing it's not desktop apps, but most probably like a web app
right,
that's using
exactly.
Kerberos. Like I know I built a lot of ASP, classic ASP apps, which would just use like Kerberos, right? Like we didn't write any auth code. You just protect it under Windows Auth, and US, like when the user is already authenticated when they hit the web application. So I'm guessing there are certain apps that they would need that, but the app proxy would help in a lot of those scenarios, right? If it's a web app, but yeah, there could be other scenarios where you might need Kerberos support, right?
Yes, exactly. So we're looking into all of that fun jazz and seeing how we can expand Kerberos as much as possible.
Into right. The biggest use cases today would be Azure Files, and I think is it Windows Virtual Desktop as well, or
Yes,
AVD,
AVD.
and
Yeah,
it's another scenario, right?
right. So Azure Files and AVD is a really big one that's common today. And so like a hybrid user wants to get access to these cloud resources, they can do that via these partner teams. And we also have excuse me. We also have SQLMI support today as well for hybrid users. And that is going back to what I mentioned in the beginning, they actually use this down level support for Entra Kerberos. But that is currently supported today as well.
Right. Nice. What's the down level scenario? That is where it is an on-prem device that's trying to access a resource that's protected by Entra on the Kerberos side, right? This is like Azure Files is an example. Is
Mm.
that the scenario?
So there's multiple scenarios for down level. One of them is, yes, what you mentioned, where it could be an older Windows device or a newer Windows device that's managed on-prem.
On-prem, right?
Yep. And then innately all of their Entra Kerberos will have to be this down level. And then just additionally, even if you have a modern device that's managed by Entra, no matter what, the SQLMI implementation leverages this down level Entra Kerberos support as well. So that's just a random scenario that is a down level scenario.
Okay, so and that's built that way that it is
Right.
a down level. I think that
Right.
was one of the very first ones that did the
Yes.
whole hybrid Kerberos stuff, right? Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
right. Cool. So yeah, if I recall, those were like the three big scenarios for
Mm-hmm.
like I think file shares are the are the main reason that drive all of Kerberos, right? Like even web apps are a bit more easier, but it's
Yeah.
the file shares that do impact.
Yeah, no doubt.
I know Microsoft, like Microsoft is also building the global secure access that
Mm-hmm.
does give access to these things without having to make a lot of changes or lifting and shifting them.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has global secure access and like private access, then do they really need Kerberos
Mm.
in the flow, or is it still needed? Like, is it how does that play into this? Do you know?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Um, So yes, Entra Kerberos will still be needed in these GSA, proxy, private access scenarios. That is something that we're talking with them about and trying to collaborate with them. But to fully light up a lot of scenarios that customers want, Entra Kerberos will need to be involved.
Will definitely be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That Entra Kerberos is a hard pill to swallow in terms of understanding how it works end to end. So, and how and when to leverage Entra Kerberos in your transition from on-prem to the cloud. So if there's any sort of confusion around the process or how it works, I would love to know. And maybe that's something we need to update our public docs or create more content so customers can truly understand what they're getting into. That would also be super useful.
Nice. Yeah, definitely please feel free to share your feedback. And if you have questions and things like there are multiple Microsoft forums, we also have a Reddit forum, reddit/r/entra. So you can post things there and tag me, and I can get Jordan to help out uh, with any questions and things that you have. Cool, awesome. Was there anything else you want to cover on Entra Kerberos?
Nope. I think that was a really good summary and I hope that helped as well. So I think that was it.
Awesome. That's really good walkthrough. I know you had a nice diagram that I know you presented. Is
Hmm.
that available in any of the docs that walks through Kerberos? The
Mm,
PowerPoint.
we're yeah, we're currently in the process of updating our Entra Kerberos public docs. So if it's not there, it should be there soon. Is
Nice.
kind of my answer then. Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So the next one, which you worked on in the past, MAM for Edge.
Yes.
So tell us about it. Like, what's the problem it's trying to solve when we say MAM for Edge?
Yes. So there's like two like backgrounds I'll give you here. The first background is just that a lot of, especially as COVID hit and more folks were working remote, more and more end users were using their personal device to get access to work resources. And a lot of companies did not want to be in the business of managing personal devices. And also on the flip side, a lot of end users didn't want their company to have so much control and power over their personal device. And so there was this like uncertainty about how to be productive and get access to corporate resources, but while being at home and only having a personal device. So that was one main issue that we were facing. And then while we were brainstorming thinking about it, it kind of reminded us about what we already previously had implemented on mobile, which is called MAM, or Mobile Application Management, which is essentially one specific app within the device is managed by an organization, as opposed to MDM, which is mobile device management, which is the entire device is managed. And so when we kind of thought about those two scenarios together, we thought there could be a good marriage here and way to kind of combine both of them and solve the issue.
So this way, if I'm having my PC at home that my kids use, and I just
Right.
need to do something quick like check my email, I can just open Edge and be able to sign in, but it's all fully protected by my company, right? Like different policies would apply, and just it's only doing it for Edge. So it's not
Yes.
like the company can deploy other things onto my device
Right.
at home, like deploy different things like Defender or various run other scripts
Right.
and wipe my device. Like that's
Right.
the other biggest worry, right?
Exactly. Wiping the device, I think, is one of the biggest concerns that folks have. Yeah, no, with purely just MAM, that's like you're correct.
That's not,
That's not
yeah,
possible. Um, and it's also important to note that we strategically enabled this for Edge as opposed to Outlook and Teams and like every single application. We did this for Edge because we have such good web apps for these
face apps, right?
applications. So you can go to Outlook.com and Teams.com. You can get access to all the resources you need to via Edge. And so that way only one application on your device is managed instead of
Right.
multiple. It's just this one.
And it's a single glass of pane of glass, right? Which is
Exactly.
just that one app, and you can just focus on strengthening that versus trying to bring it to all these legacy apps like Outlook, which have been there for
Yes.
years, but I know we have newer versions which are more like browser based. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like the browser version itself. So the
Right.
whole scenario is very like it's towards BYOD
Yes.
devices, but not having to manage the device. So how secure is it in terms of we are worried about malware and other things on the home PC? Is Edge doing certain things when it's a managed device?
Yeah, so the way that we suggest the use of MAM for Edge is more of a benign user and preventing a benign user from making a mistake or doing an like a unintentional uh bad act. Like so for example, one of the um policies that an admin can apply onto Edge is preventing copy and paste. Um and this could be some like as simple as protecting your corporate resources from being pasted into a non-protected application that can be sent and um, attackers can see that. What we don't necessarily say is that MAM for Edge should be used as purely a security point of view from preventing hackers or bad actors from attacking this application. Um, if you really want that full security, then you need to
You have
consider
to
MDM.
manage
This
the device,
is
right?
Right. This is purely just to have more protection about the resources.
Right. So if you are already giving browser access to people, to your
Yeah.
users from home devices, then apply MAM, you get a bit more protection on those. You can apply some more additional policies
Right.
on it to prevent the user from accidentally doing things, right? Like
Yeah.
copying and pasting into WhatsApp. Like it's
Yes.
a, maybe you might have a company policy, but they might, not, it might be a mistaken thing that they
Yeah.
would do. Right.
And then something else that's been pretty interesting is that we've seen customers leverage both MDM and MAM on a Windows device because MDM doesn't have that granular of capabilities of applying such specific policies to applications like the copy
Right.
and paste. So companies that really want the extra security can now have both MAM and MDM and feel more confident with their end users accessing these resources.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting one because yeah, I would say even if you have MDM and you manage, you're not like, unless it's like completely locked down,
Right.
users would still be able to browse to different sites and paste things in accidentally, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
this would help protect those. Nice.
Hmm.
Nice. So what do people need to be able to deploy this? Is it just some policies you configure in Intune for all of this to work? Is there any config in Entra that needs to be done?
Yes, so Intune is the biggest scenario you need to have here. And then like even like taking like more basic, you need to have a device that is managed in the cloud. So for example, BYOD is very common to be an Entra registered device. Um, so you need to have that type of device. Which will get kicked off in the process of enabling it. So
Signing
it's
into
not
Edge, right?
right, exactly. Um, and then that's really it. Like you need to create the conditional access con policy within Intra, but it's pretty simple compared to the Intune configuration. The Intune configuration, you can choose exactly which policies are going to be applied and to whom and things like that. Within Intra, you just kind of say, I want these MAMA policies to be applied that I
Right.
previously
Like you
defined in
should,
Intune. Yeah,
right. That's like you can only access it, access these web apps when you are, or access Edge when you are coming from the approved device, right? So it makes sure the Intune policies are being applied.
exactly.
And if they're not, the user sort of blocked until they fix that.
Exactly. Yeah, they are blocked with a educational prompt that allows end users to upgrade to MAM and then get access to their resources.
And this is also, I believe, is it Windows only? Does it work on Mac? Or it's
It
meant for Windows. Okay, Edge, right?
yeah, yeah. Um yeah, it's currently only for Windows. But we do notice a lot of our customers are very Windows heavy, so we were able to support most of our customers with this decision by doing Windows. Yeah.
Cool. That's definitely a very interesting scenario to be like, lightly managed, depending on the security of the app and what
Right.
users are accessing. You'll be able to open it up in a bit more secure way than just a complete um, open, unmanaged device, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it really like helps the companies feel more secure and it helps the end users not feel trapped is too strong of a word. It helps the end users not feel maybe overwhelmed by giving so much control to their company as well. Um, and kind of empowers them to say like what you mentioned before, like, oh, I just quickly want to check my email. I was waiting to hear back from someone. I'm curious if what they said. as opposed to having to go to the full setup with your managed device. Yeah.
And there's a lot of, like, even from a support perspective on a personal device,
Yeah.
you don't know what they have, and
Yeah.
it's very hard to really secure a device anyway when you're not building it from scratch.
Yeah, true.
When you don't know what starting point it was when it started off being managed. So that Mamfi sort of makes it a lot more simpler to
Yes.
make sure you have at least some sort of security on it, and also prevent all these accidental usage, right? And I believe you also get visibility, right, from an Entra perspective, because you're enforcing at least the registration, Entra registration, so you can see the devices that the user is coming in from, which I would say would help even with features like ID protection and so on, because Entra would know about the device when the user is
Right.
signing in.
Exactly. It would show up in the sign-in logs, the audit logs, and so if there's like some like curious event that happened, an admin would be able to investigate what was going on, and understand and track it down a little bit better.
Yeah.
So it does give that visibility without too much visibility,
Without
I
the user
suppose.
compromising too much, right?
Yeah.
Because with MAM for Edge, you will be able to know how many devices the user is signing in from their home
Yes. Great point.
PC, or like, the number of devices. Whereas if it's unmanaged, you only get the IP address and you don't know how many devices they're coming in from. So if something did happen, you can't really know which one of those sign-ins were affected, right? If there are multiple devices in the mix. So
Right, yes.
all of that would help, like later if you are doing threat hunting and so on, to narrow down where those sign-ins happen and so on. Yeah,
Right.
so yeah, I would say it's a feature that you should turn on if you are giving access
Yeah.
from any unmanaged device. You should have that on so that you get at least some visibility, better than just being an unmanaged device.
Yeah, and it's really not too much effort for the end user. You do the setup once, you do the device registration once, which is it's as simple as pressing a button with a prompt.
With the
And then
yeah.
you're set up. Like for the remainder of the time, you're now managed and you're good to go. So the productivity is not hindered. While also giving that extra security benefit, investigation benefit, like we just mentioned.
Nice. Yeah. That's like, if I were an admin, I would definitely have that on the top of my
Yes.
list. If I were allowing unmanaged, access from
Yes.
unmanaged devices, this adds a lot of visibility and brings in a layer of security to that. And this also, I'm assuming, would be tied to Intune as well. You would need to have Intune.
Yes.
If you are on another MDM provider, it doesn't really work, right?
Right. MAM is a proprietary product that Intune creates.
Right.
So it could be the type of thing like you could have MDM with another third-party provider, but MAM in particular.
Right. And
is
this doesn't
Intune.
prevent you, right? Because this is
No.
like, that's a good thing as well. So even if you have MDM with another provider, for this use case, if you're licensed for Intune, if you have E5, then you can just still use, or not even E5, sorry, E3. If you have
Right.
Intune, then you can just use this for unmanaged devices, right? Which
Exactly.
doesn't fall under the MDM scope, right?
Yes.
So that's a neat. So there's nothing preventing someone who's maybe having another MDM from using this feature and securing the unmanaged device sign-in.
Exactly right. So
Nice.
it's lots of flexibility here.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a feature I'm excited, but I don't think that many people know or try it out.
Yeah.
I feel it's less known, one of the lesser known features.
Yes, we need to give it some more love and more support. It's a
Yes,
really great feature.
it is. It is. And for you, that's a more fun feature to build.
Yes.
There's lots of moving parts.
I think it was super fun because it was a lot of cross-team elements. So, you worked with the Edge team, you worked with the Intune
Oh,
team, with my
yes.
own
Yeah.
team. Yeah. So it's really great just collaborating and learning from so many different people and trying to see how we can put all the puzzle pieces together.
In together, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's a like all Microsoft. Like people think Microsoft is one big company, but it's not a small small
Yes.
orgs working together. Yeah, and I love these features where it's all different teams coming
Yeah.
together to
Build
produce an
one
output.
like fluid scenario. Yeah, it's not an easy task to do, but it's really
Yes,
wonderful when it all comes together.
yes, absolutely love it. Cool, awesome. Jordan, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really loved. You you seem to get like some of the nicest features to work on.
I'm pretty lucky. Yeah.
And I know you did stuff before with the hybrid join, the dsreg cmd command and stuff
Mhm.
as well.
Yep.
I think that's when I first got to work with you on improving that experience, right?
Yes.
Which we like everyone who's done hybrid join knows about the dsreg cmd command. And I remember you
Snowflake.
worked on it, showed some love, improved it from what it used to be before. It's a lot better.
Well,
Yeah,
yes, thank
so
you.
thank you for all of the, the work you do to making our hybrid world a better experience.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been a lovely conversation.
Awesome. All right, folks, until next time, see you for now.
Bye.